What's going on, Washington fans? Welcome to the JTFB channel here on YouTube, where I talk all things Washington Commanders, and I'm continuing to talk about some draft prospects that I love for the team coming up in the draft, which is just under 3 weeks away. Finally, we can stop the debates of not only quarterback at number 2, who we're going to take, but just know who the new additions to the team are for the season coming up, which I'm excited about. New additions to the front office, new additions to the coaching staff, and then a lot of big changes when it comes to this roster. And speaking of changes to the roster, if you saw on social media this week, I dropped some big news, and that is on Monday night, I will be joined by one of my biggest guests here on the channel, and that is the newest addition to the running back room in Washington, the one and only Austin Ekeler, who has been one of the most productive running backs over the last few years in the NFL, going from undrafted free agent, just this underdog mentality, and killing it as one of the top running backs in the NFL. Like I said, over the last few years, just dominates every year. So I'm excited to have him not only in the running back room, but to be here on the channel for y'all just to get to know him, talk about some on-the-field stuff. We'll talk about Washington, of course, and then some really important off-the-field things that he does, and I'm a huge fan of, that I've been keeping up with over the last few years. So I'm excited about that. So stay tuned for Monday night, where I'll drop that video. I haven't decided if we'll go live or if I'll just do a video, because it's not going to be too long. It's going to be like 20, 25 minutes, whatever. Like I said, just talking about stuff with the team and everything. So I might just do a video, just me and him talk, ask him some questions and stuff like that, just so I can, get as much, information for y'all in that, short period of time instead of just going live. And it goes by so fast when you're live. Trust me, guys. It goes by ridiculously fast. But nonetheless, super excited to join Austin on the channel here and like I said, talk about some Washington stuff. So glad we can do that for y'all. But on this episode, if you saw on my last one, I covered wide receiver draft prospects that I like for Washington. And of course, cornerback is one of those top needs that needs to be addressed in the draft. Now, I still have high hopes for Greg Newsome. I still have high hopes for him. I would love for him to get traded from the Browns to Washington between now and maybe the draft, maybe draft night. Who knows? I would love for that. But just in case it doesn't happen, I'm going to talk about some of my favorite fits at corner and how I think that Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, and then also Coach Joe Witt Jr. are going to really look at that corner position and how things could really play out. Now, on the last video, I did a bunch of cut-ups, some all-22 stuff for wide receivers, and everything was good. I got hit with a copyright on shout-out to UVA. I don't know how or why, but they copyrighted some all-22 that I had on Malik Washington, but it's okay. It is what it is. It's whatever. So I'm not going to do that on this episode. I'm going to just, pull up screen of some guys I'm looking at here on PFF, break down some stuff, talk about my favorite fits and stuff like that. But then once we actually get our players drafted, once we have our draft class, I'm going to go one by one and do, breakdowns and stuff on those players, have some other people on to talk about, watch some film of, who we draft, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, whoever, every single pick. Go through it, see what we like, see what we don't like, and really talk about those draft picks. Because then I don't care. It's a much, smaller chance to get hit with the copyright if I'm just doing one team in one school. Some will go through, some won't. But when I'm doing a video where I'm showing like 8 to 10 different players, it's very likely I get hit with the copyright. It is what it is. But I'm trying to grow this thing, monetize, making some money off of this. I don't want to get hit with all these copyright strikes, because then it kind of takes away some stuff I can do, and I don't want to, have to deal with that. But so like I said, on this episode, I'm going to talk about some corner prospects I like, talk about some top 30 visits that Washington has planned so far. Of course, we're going to add some to that as well. But let me go ahead and bring up my screen and get right to it. And as always, hit that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy what you see. But then also in the comments below, drop some of your favorite corner prospects that maybe I don't talk about, or maybe some I have, just why you like these players and such. Always love hearing from y'all. So like I said, pick number 2, it's going to be a quarterback. Whoever it is, we don't know. But outside of that, the last few, I'll say, the last week or two, I've kind of leaned towards a certain way. And I'll kind of do a quick hit. We have Emmanuel Forbes, Ben St. Juste, Quan Martin, what's going to happen with him? Obviously, we lost Kendall Fuller. Just a lot of question marks in that corner room. Could it really be, Forbes and St. Juste on the outside to start? I don't think so. I mean, obviously, I think Forbes is the guy. Dan Quinn talked highly of him not too long ago. He did an interview. I forgot where it was. Maybe it was like the weekly meeting or the annual meeting for the teams, whatever, when they were doing votes for plays and rules and all that. I can't remember where it was. But Dan Quinn had some good things to say about Emmanuel Forbes. Obviously, first round draft pick. I think, first off, Dan Quinn and Coach Witt are going to really get the most out of Forbes and utilize him to where he's going to be successful. So I have high hopes. I think he has a giant leap this year. You're like, well, obviously, because he had a bad year last year, he's, he should have a, better year. But, having a rough year like that's tough to come back from, mentally, just confidence-wise. But I don't feel like that's going to be the case for Forbes. I got his jersey. I'm repping my guy. I still feel good about him. I'm still Team Forbes. I can't wait. I think he's going to have a big year. St. Juste, I don't know how they feel about him. Obviously, when they do their roster evaluation, they got rid of a lot of players. They signed a lot of players. They signed some depth corners. Not, in my opinion, anyone that's going to compete for a starting spot. That's just my opinion. Like I said, we did add a handful of some of these veteran depth guys, though. But I don't think it's like, okay, we have our corner 1, corner 2 on the team kind of thing. I don't think so. Could we see some Quan Martin possibly play corner? Yeah. Maybe some nickel corner. Who knows? Depends on how things really fall for them in the draft. But just like a lot of positions, they kind of covered some holes. Like, all right, we got some veteran corners that can come in if needed, and it's not going to just be like a giant drop-off. So this is where I'm kind of leaning towards, though. And I'm gonna give you my thought process throughout the whole thing. Could they trade up, into the first round with, pick 36 or pick 40 and come back up into the first round to take one of the top corners? Maybe, but I don't think so. I think that's the least likely option. But in my opinion, if it turns out this way because of the run of offensive linemen, the run of wide receivers, where you have a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry that falls to you there at 36, Kool-Aid would be the perfect corner for the defense that Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. are going to run here in Washington. You're going to see a lot of man coverage. You're going to see a lot of, press at the line, maybe some soft press, maybe some off man, maybe even some bail. But you're going to see a lot of man coverage. And what I see from Dan Quinn's defense when he was in Dallas is a lot of man coverage, but also it's more of a visual coverage when it comes to man. Like, yes, you're playing the wide receiver, but you are playing so heavy to the quarterback's eyes. It helps you anticipate throws. It helps you get these interceptions. I mean, you've seen it with Deron Bland. Like, when Trayvon Diggs went down, they didn't skip a beat. Stephon Gilmore played really well. Like I said, Deron Bland broke the record for most pick sixes in a season. Like, he had a historic season as a, late round guy out of Fresno State, wasn't a household name, wasn't a Kool-Aid McKinstry. But with the kind of scheme that they're going to run here in a heavy man coverage, like, they want guys who can win one-on-one. And honestly, that's why I think Forbes is going to be great, because they want Forbes to be that one-on-one man, play that vision coverage like he did at Mississippi State. That's what allowed him to get all these interceptions in college. That's what allowed these turnovers to happen. So I think that Dan Quinn's going to let Forbes do that. But when you look at Kool-Aid McKinstry, and y'all know I'm an Alabama fan, so I absolutely love Kool-Aid. I love Terrion Arnold as well. Now, who fits the most and who's more likely to maybe be there? And now Kool-Aid had a small fracture in his foot. Maybe it causes him to fall a little bit, but he still had like a 440 something, 40 time at the pro day. Like, even, not long after he was recovering from that foot surgery. Like, in my opinion, Kool-Aid helped himself at the pro day. Just looked great. For a guy who was dealing with a foot injury, did not look like he had one at all. He only allowed 1 touchdown last season. But you look at the stats down here, played 769 outside. Kool-Aid has been one of the lockdown guys over the last few years. Even last year, he was phenomenal. I think he was even better this year. He was targeted 39 times this season and only allowed 19 catches for 205 yards. I'll take that all day long. He's only allowed 3 touchdowns in his entire career at Alabama over a 3-year stretch. And he has over 2,000 snaps on defense. So that's ridiculous. But like I said, I'm a big fan of Kool-Aid. I think he has great hips. I think he's really good in space. I think he can play man-to-man with anybody. Being in front of him, he has long arms. I love his size. I love his frame. 6'1", 195. McKinstry plays one of the most difficult positions in the game with so much poise and production. He might not be an elite athlete, but he is one of the smartest cornerback prospects you'll find. He can play in any defensive scheme and is the type of player you draft in the first round. Sounds great. One thing I do want him to be a little bit more reactive, a little bit more instinctive, and I think he would absolutely grow, like I said, under Dan Quinn, under Coach Witt Jr. in that aspect. But if a guy like Kool-Aid makes it to pick 36 somehow, I think that's so hard to turn out. Like, it's going to be hard to say no to that. But I think that they're going to be leaning a different way. Now, TJ Tampa is a guy who's been linked to Washington a lot. You see a lot of, mock drafts saying TJ Tampa would be a great fit for, Dan Quinn. You can do a lot of things with him. He plays primarily corner. Some people think you can move him around a little bit. In my opinion, I really want him to stay out there and play corner. 6'2", 200. That's pretty big. Tampa's unique fluidity and size for a cornerback make him worthy of a top 75 pick. If he can clean up his footwork, he can be a starting outside cornerback in the NFL with the potential to be an impact player. And I'm telling you guys, when I saw his film, just watching how he's all over the field and how he plays, guys, I'm a big TJ Tampa fan. I think this is a more likely pick at 36. Compared to Kool-Aid, I don't think he'll fall that far. I think TJ Tampa is going to be the best corner available when it comes to Washington being on the clock. At 36, I think he fits exactly what they want to do, especially in man coverage. And people are like, his man coverage grade's not as good as his zone. That means nothing to me. First off, you don't know how often they played in man, how often they played in zone at Iowa State. I feel like they play a lot of man. At Iowa State. So TJ Tampa, Kool-Aid McKinstry, in my opinion, two big options in that 36 range. Big time. Maybe 40. Maybe they go offensive line at 36 and go corner at 40. In my opinion, that's great. Mike Sanders still is a baller. Super undersized. He's like 5'8" and 180 something. Yeah. 5'10" is what they say. I think he's smaller than that. I want to say he's like 5'9". 182, 23 years old coming out of the draft. Great nickel corner. I mean, there's so many people that are raving about Mike Sanders still and just how much he pops on tape, how fast he is to get in position. He had a ton of interceptions too. What was it? 6 interceptions at Michigan this year. That's just in one season. I think he would be a great inside nickel corner. Can you take a strictly nickel corner at pick 36 or 40? I don't know. That's tough. That's one you have to argue about. But it would not surprise me if they did because he's that good. He is that good. There's guys like Kamari Lassiter and Enos Rakestraw Jr. But another guy, there's two guys right here I'm looking at. Maybe 3. I'll talk about 3 of these guys. That I like fit-wise for Washington. Lassiter, and his Rakestraw, I think there's 4 guys, in my opinion. If you gave me $100 to bet on every corner in the draft and say, tell me which corner you think Washington will absolutely draft, there's 3 guys that pop out to me more than any of them. And the first one is Kyrie Jackson. First off, he's a DMV kid. But second off, more importantly, I love his size. 6'3", 195. His length is amazing on tape. That's a pause. I know. I set myself up for that. Kyrie Jackson is extremely lengthy when it comes to his arms, his frame. But his size doesn't hold him back for how much he moves. That's the one thing that surprised me. When you see these long, lengthy corners that, have the size, it usually takes away from their speed and their acceleration and their hips, recovery speed, stuff like that. Kyrie Jackson does. Let's see what it says about him. Jackson is an alluring prospect because of his size and athletic combination. Doesn't come around often. Exactly. However, he must anticipate routes better and not rely on his recovery speed as much. If he can do this, he can be a starting caliber cornerback in the NFL with a shutdown skill set, which I think he absolutely can. I think the thing that really showed up to me, and I go back to those Washington games when he has, Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, my guy Jalen Polk, who I absolutely love. When it comes to those Washington games, I keep watching Kyrie Jackson and how well he played, and he covered mostly Rome Odunze. I think one game Rome popped off and one game he didn't. Like Kyrie kind of held his own. But the way it's just, I love his skill set. And man, and press, it's so hard for a wide receiver to get around a corner like Kyrie. So imagine this. Man coverage, you're about, 3 yards off of a wide receiver. Obviously at the snap of the ball, you can press within those 5 yards. You jam them at the line. Jam them. You don't want them to get that single move, that release to where they get outside and they can go and stack you. Hit them first. Get that first contact. Kind of like an edge rusher. Get that first contact on a wide receiver. Push him off a little bit. Get him off that step to where he's setting up his stem. That release helps set up that stem. I'm going to hit you with a single move. Or I'm going to hit you with a double move. And then I'm going to try to get back on track and then stack you on my stem and get that separation. When Kyrie, he hits you with like a little single jab, or if he's jamming you, both hands at the line, puts you right there in front of him, kind of gets you off. He can run with you. He can be physical, run with you. He's not going to hold you, anything like that. But his long arms kind of keep you, not like a box out in basketball because you're obviously running, but kind of like the same thing. Just keeping you like, hey, I'm going to keep you right here at my hip. We're going to be hip to hip. We're going to run hip to hip. The second I lose you hip to hip, that's when I need to, kick in that recovery to get back, hip to hip. But I think that Kyrie Jackson is a guy I keep coming back to for Washington. Like, he just seems like such a Dan Quinn corner. I think he's worthy of a late second round pick, but if he's there early third, I think Kyrie Jackson would be a home run. This is one guy, like I said, I've been watching. Obviously a former Alabama player. Hated to see him go to Oregon. I've been a Kyrie Jackson fan for a while, and I think this past year was one of his best. Like, I think, and there's different things with the transfer portal. Obviously, anytime a player leaves Alabama, I'm like, dang, they're making a big mistake. But I think him going to Oregon was really good for him. I saw a big step up with Kyrie. Not saying he wasn't going to get that at Alabama, but who knows? Maybe a situation, maybe it was scheme, maybe it was just, the team, whatever, coaching, whatever. But I saw a big time step up with Kyrie Jackson this past year at Oregon. And he helped his draft stock a lot. So I think Kyrie Jackson's one of the 4 that I circle a lot. Now, the next one's right below him, Max Melton. And this is a guy, I forgot who it was, but someone with like NFL Network or ESPN. So don't be surprised if this guy's drafted in the late first. Now, I don't see that happening. But I said back in December, a list of guys that I really liked. I said, these are guys that I am higher than a lot of other people are in the draft. So I said this like, middle of December or whatever. I said Curtis Jacobs, Ben Sinnott, Javion Cohen, Cedric Gray, Kyrie Jackson, Gabe Murphy, Michael Pratt, the quarterback, Adisa Isaac, my boy Malachi Corley, and then Max Melton. So 2 guys that I just watched throughout the whole season that kept coming back, and, I keep, circling around. I'm like, why are these guys not getting more recognition, more national attention, especially when it comes to the draft community? There's 2 guys, Kyrie Jackson and then Max Melton. Brother of Bo Melton, wide receiver. I think he's on the Packers. The one thing about Max Melton is that Rutgers defense was stingy the last few years, like really good. I'm like, man, let me watch some more of this Rutgers tape. And Max Melton was one of those guys who just was one of those leaders on the defense, one of those leaders on the field, one of those like on the field coaches. Really good when it came to, stopping big plays. At the Senior Bowl, for instance, he got beat by one play, and then the next play he came back, punched out a fumble, recovered it. Like there's there's so much things I like about Max, like his personality, how he attacks plays, how he attacks wide receivers. I think he can play man, he can play zone. Obviously, Rutgers isn't like Ohio State or Michigan or anything like that. It's not the best team. But I look for these guys that no matter what team they're on, no matter what their situation is, they show up every single play, whether it's with their effort, whether it's with the results. And Max Melton is one of those guys. It would not surprise me if Max Melton goes in the second round. I think late first is kind of crazy talk. I forgot who said it, but somebody said it not too long ago. But it would not surprise me if Max Melton goes late second. Like, I think that's the ceiling for Max. Now, perfect round for him would be third. So I think he's an option with one of those third round picks that we have. So he's number 2 on my very likely corners between Kyrie Jackson, Max Melton. I think this is a guy that could start outside right away. Do I think he's going to be like some dominant corner? Maybe not. But once again, when we hired Dan Quinn, I was like, let me think about that Dallas defense. Let me think about what was good, what was bad. And like I said, what was good was Dan Quinn was doing a lot with just a little bit. When Trayvon Diggs went down, we all said, dang, like that sucks. That secondary is going to be awful. Not really expecting much out of him. And then Deron Bland just pops off. Like I said, Stephon Gilmore had a down year the year before last. And then this past season, he looked great again. Like, he was great. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if we signed him for 1 year for like a little stopgap in Washington. If things don't go well in the draft, he's still out there. He hasn't joined anybody yet. But I just keep going back to that secondary, whether it was safety, whether it was corner. He was doing a lot with just a little bit. That's why I keep thinking to myself, I don't think they're going to have to take a corner in the first. I don't think they have to take one in the second. I think Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. can take a corner in the third, and they would look like a top 10 pick. Once again, I'm not saying he's going to turn into, Sauce Gardner their first year. But from what I've seen, the results, Dan Quinn and Coach Witt get the most out of their players. They get who really fits what they want to do. And that's something I noticed with free agency. And that's something that I think we're going to see with the draft, which is why I'm trying to focus on certain players and not just be like, go down the whole list. Oh, yeah, Enos Rakestraw is good. Andrew Phillips is good. Jarian Jones, Renardo Green's good. They'd be good in the third. What does Dan Quinn want out of his corners? And I think Max Melton in the third round could start day one, and people will be like, oh, my gosh, I don't know. I'm kind of concerned. But he would not skip a beat. And Dan Quinn and Coach Witt would have him ready. I think when it comes to just personality-wise, but then also trait-wise on the field, I think Max Melton fits what they're looking for. I really like the fit with Kyrie Jackson and Max Melton. Both of those, honestly, are great. Max Melton, by the way, 6 foot 190. Melton is an intriguing cornerback prospect because the slot might be his best role in the NFL. He does bring a lot of experience on the outside, though. Melton projects as a priority day 3 pick with inside-outside versatility. I think he's a third-round pick. I have a third-round grade on Max Melton. They have him at ranked 80, which is third round, right? Yeah. Renardo Green's a guy I keep coming back to as well. Jarvis Brownlee Jr. impressed the heck out of me at the Senior Bowl. He had one of the best weeks there. But I'm going to go to one of my draft crushes. I have 5 draft crushes, and I've been talking about them a couple times. And Cam Hart's been one of those. And the thing is, I'm not going to act like I've been on the Cam Hart train for long. But at the Senior Bowl, if there was one player that impressed me the most, it was Cam Hart out of Notre Dame. I didn't really know much about him. Like, when I'm watching Notre Dame, Cam Hart wasn't the guy I'm always looking for. It's Benjamin Morrison. It's the future first-round corner. But when I was watching some Caleb film, I saw some really good Cam Hart film. I'm like, okay. This is a guy I'm going to look at, when the Senior Bowl comes. This is a guy I have written, like I wrote his name down. This is a guy I had circled. Come back to him after every day of practice. See what Cam Hart did at practice. And Cam Hart dominated in practice. One-on-one drills, are the most wide receiver friendly drills ever made. I hate it for DBs, but Cam Hart absolutely dominated in those reps. I mean, cutting off Xavier Leggett, cutting off Tez Walker and getting an interception, running with guys one-on-one, Brendan Rice. It didn't matter. Cam Hart was a dog all week. I'm a big Cam Hart fan. Now, Washington has a top 30 visit playing with Cam Hart. I don't think it's happened yet. Keep an eye on that. But Cam Hart is a giant dude. First off, he is phenomenal in man coverage. That is his expertise. Play him in man. He only allowed 15 catches for 137 yards this past year and a passer rating of 67.1. But like I said, he's a beast. 6'2", 207, extremely long arms. Once again, a lengthy guy, bigger body guy. The only knock on him, in my opinion, is maybe his acceleration, maybe his speed a little bit, but also he had a couple injuries over the last few seasons. Nothing too crazy where I'm like, wow, I'm kind of concerned. But I mean, it says right here, he started 32 games outside a corner over the past 3 seasons. He's a physical zone cornerback who is very competitive, showing a willingness to good fundamentals in the run game. His overall athleticism is concerning, though. Too often receivers were able to get even or separate against him when running vertical routes. His acceleration speed is decent, but is more build-up speed than twitchiness. So that's like I was saying. It's kind of, I need him to work on that twitch, that acceleration just a little bit when it comes to speed. But in my opinion, it says he's a zone guy. From what I've seen watching the tape and what I've seen watching him at the Senior Bowl in person, I think he's a man guy. Now, in my opinion, that they get that from, if he can't improve the slight footwork, that twitch, that ability to turn your hips to get upfield and run with the wide receiver, then maybe man coverage one-on-one is going to be tough. But in my opinion, if he can clean that up, I think he's going to be great. I think it'd be a phenomenal man corner. And it shows. It shows in his stats this year. It shows in his grade in his man coverage. But like I said, when I was watching these one-on-one drills at the Senior Bowl, not a single wide receiver was getting past Cam Hart. They could not stack him. They could not compete with his, physical toughness. They just could not get past him. And that big body, that wingspan he has, great for Cam Hart. Absolutely love it. And like I said, Washington's bringing him for top 30, so there's obviously some interest there. They don't just bring in guys for the heck of it for top 30s. I know it's not like a lock we're gonna, draft him. But in my opinion, you bring him in because you want to ask him some questions. You want to watch some film with him. You want to break some stuff down. You want to talk about the injuries he had, stuff like that. But I love the Cam Hart fit when it comes to Washington. If he can clean some things up, and once again, I think he would have no problem doing that with Dan Quinn and Coach Witt. I think Cam Hart, like I said, he's one of my draft crushes. This whole draft, one of 5. It's hard to make that list. That's a very prestigious list. Josh's draft crushes between Ben Sinnott, Cam Hart. I try not to put high, prospects like Troy Franklin on there. So Malachi Corley's been my one. But it's hard to make that list. And Cam Hart has been on it since the Senior Bowl. I was like, I've seen enough. Get this guy into Washington, please. Even it's right when we hired Dan Quinn, I was like, yo, Cam Hart would be a Dan Quinn corner all day long. Now, speaking of top 30 visits, there's another guy that we are having a top 30 with. I have not seen him in Washington yet. I know he visited with the Bears, and he was also out of the country for a little bit. Elijah Jones. Now you want to talk about size and athletic profile. Elijah Jones is it. This guy's ridiculous. And he is an absolute man coverage corner. 90.8 grade last year. He had 5 interceptions, only allowed 13 receptions for 194 yards on that Boston College defense. He dropped 0 interceptions, only missed 3 tackles. He can play slot and he can play outside corner. I'm surprised they play him in the slot for how big he is. 6'2". He's only 184, so a little bit leaner. But for his length, I'm kind of surprised they played him in the slot as much as they did. But when it comes to athletic profile and once again playing that heavy man coverage, Elijah Jones was an absolute unit. I haven't watched a lot of his tape yet. But when it comes to the relative athletic score, he had a 8.95. His vertical was 42.5 and his broad was 10.11. That's ridiculous. He ran a 4.44 40-yard dash, and his official weight was 185. So that's the one thing kind of weighing him down. He's right at 6'1.5", 6'2". Hand size 9.25, arm length 31.5. I'm taking that all day long. The short speed kind of lacks that just a little bit. But in my opinion, being able to play one-on-one out on the island, I think Elijah Jones would be great. I think this is a guy who could go late third, early fourth. I think those testings in the combine numbers, or like his 40 times and vertical and stuff like that helped out a lot. But definitely going to get some tape on Elijah Jones and watch him a little bit more just to see what Boston College was cooking. But those are two guys that have confirmed top 30 visits. I think those are the only corners right now that we have as top 30 visits. If I can remember correctly, I have a list of everything. Kim Hart, Michael Penix, Trevin Wallace, Caden Wallace, Jaden Daniels, Chop Robinson, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Elijah Jones, JT Sanders, Jordan Morgan, and Kieran Amagaji. So far for top 30 visits. So two corners. And they're those guys that are in like the middle third, maybe early fourth range, which is kind of like I said, guys, I truly think that Dan Quinn and Coach Witt are going to be able to do a lot with just a little bit. They don't need much. They don't have to have a top, 15 pick at corner. I don't think so. And I know a lot of fans are like, oh my gosh, we got Cam Hart or we got Kyrie Jackson or Max Melton starting on the outside day one. I don't know. But the results show their defense plays to his players. And like I said, he's going to be picky about what he wants. He knows what kind of corners he wants. Kendall Fuller didn't fit it. Kendall Fuller was more of a zone guy. He was a really good zone guy. I think he could play man. But for the contract, for what they want to do, it just didn't fit. I think Kendall's going to kill it with the Dolphins in Miami. I love that. I love that for him. But I think Kyrie Jackson, Max Melton, Cam Hart, Elijah Jones are four guys that I just keep coming back to, and TJ Tampa too. Like I said, maybe if they decide to go second round corner, TJ Tampa, like you're a Washington Commander, absolutely. But when I'm looking at round 3 and 4, it's those four guys: Kyrie Jackson, Max Melton, Cam Hart, Elijah Jones. Now there's some late round guys here that shouldn't be here. Josh Newton slept on. I know Serge loves Josh Newton. Kalen Carson. I like Cho Smith-Wade. He had a big week at the Senior Bowl too. Killed it. He was great. Nehemiah Pritchett. He's a good lengthier guy too. DJ James, his teammate at Auburn. Kalen King, in my opinion, man, I don't get the fall of Kalen King. People saying he had a terrible year this year. I don't think so. Didn't allow a touchdown. I know he didn't have any interceptions. Only allowed 290 yards. And most of them came against, the last 2 games of the season, but then also like Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, I don't know. I think Kalen King is still going to be a stud. Ryan Watts is another name that's getting brought up around the league. Johnny Dixon's another one. Daquan Hardy, these Penn State boys. Daquan Hardy is a really good returner as well. So maybe some, being able to play corner and special teams there, maybe late rounds. Jarius Monroe, even though he's a smaller guy, he's a guy I like. Oh no, he's 6'2", 205. Small school, being in Tulane. Now they balled out. They've been great the last few years. 3 interceptions this past year. He's another late round guy that a lot of people have talked about a little bit more recently. But I think they're going to stick that 3rd, 4th round for a corner. I think 3rd. And it's going to be either Cam Hart, Elijah Jones, Max Melton, Kyrie Jackson. I'm telling you, if you give me $100, I'm going to split it between those 4. I'm going to go 25, 25, 25, 25. And I feel like I'm going to hit something. I'm going to leave with something. I'm going to leave here with something. But maybe they add some more guys late rounds, but I think that's the point of getting some of these Depth guys. I think that was the biggest, thing of like getting some veterans to fill in that depth role. Maybe they just draft one. I think that's all they need. Like I said, with the versatility of Quan Martin, maybe they're going to play a little bit more him. They're going to play some big nickel. They're going to play some big dime. You're going to have 3 safeties. You're going to have 3 corners, some packages. They're going to mix some things up. I think it's going to be a heavy man defense, though, which I like. Like I honestly, I like that. I want a corner that can be out there with the best of them, go one-on-one with the wide receiver, and just show out. I love that. Like I go back to like the Darrelle Revis days where he's just one-on-one with the best. The best. Revis Island. Nobody can get past Darrelle Revis. Like that's what I'm dying for. It's a guy that can just play out there by himself, get interceptions, get big plays, big pass breakups. If I had to pick one corner today that I think would be a great day one starter, I'm gonna go Kyrie Jackson. I want to say Cam Hart, but Kyrie Jackson in the 3rd round would be amazing. It would feed families. Like I said, I think this past year was a big year for him. I saw him check a lot of the boxes that I really wanted to see at Alabama. Struggled, here and there at Alabama. But 6'3", 195, sign me up. That's what I want. And like he's a local guy too. I know a lot of people hate that, but I like it. But yeah, that size with his combination of his athleticism and his movement and his skills and how he really uses his size to his advantage, I love it. So those are my favorite corner prospects. Let me know what y'all think. Obviously, like I would love a Nate Wiggins, Terrion Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell would be great. I think, honestly, he's probably my favorite corner in the whole draft. I think he's the best. I just don't see it happening. I've said it a million times, but I just want to reiterate. I think, and it's okay, by the way. I think Dan Quinn, Joe Jr. are going to get one in the 3rd or 4th. They could start outside day one, and they would be ready. They would have him ready. Like I said, we saw what they did with Deron Bland. Not expecting, Trayvon Diggs to be out for the season. And you just go back and see what they did with that defense. And not even just last year. Just over the last, few years, how much they turned that defense around. How it went from one of the worst to one of the best. So I'm excited. Obviously, we still do need a corner, but don't think that it has to be a top corner. It has to be a top, 30 pick. Like I said, maybe they do go TJ Tampa at 36. But I think, maybe offensive line, maybe a big-time wide receiver, if somebody falls there, would be more of an option at 36 and 40 to where they could wait till that 3rd round with that first pick, get a corner like Kyrie Jackson, Max Melton, Cam Hart, Elijah Jones, one of those guys. And I think he would be great on day one. People are going to want that Sauce Gardner, that flashy name, that big-time spotlight as a number 1 corner, but I think we have that with Emmanuel Forbes. We got him in the 1st round for a reason. I know it didn't look the part last year, but, with awful coaching, what do you expect him to do? So I think we're going to see a giant leap from Forbes. I think he can turn into a corner 1 in this league, on Washington. And then I think whoever we draft here in the 3rd or 4th round, my prediction is going to be corner 2 with some high upside, like a really good corner 2. Kyrie Jackson, in my opinion, is the best fit for Washington. So, like I said, subscribe if you haven't already. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy what you saw. But then also drop your comments. What corners do you like? Do you think they should trade up for one? Maybe they should have traded for Snead. What are they doing? Maybe. Like I said, Dan Quinn can do a lot with just a little. So I will see y'all, like I said, Monday night. I will be doing a video with Austin Eckler. So I'll see y'all then. Might do something else this weekend. Might not. Got some work stuff I got to do. But if not, I'll see y'all Monday. Appreciate y'all watching. See y'all next time here on the JTFB channel. Peace.